Hello and welcome to the Browns Blitz. Today is Sunday, Easter Sunday, April the 12th, and this is episode number 47. We have a special episode with a special guest today. We're going to talk some Browns NFL draft with Thor Nystrom. Thor is from Rotoworld NBC Sports and is a former FSWA, easy for me to say, College Sports Writer of the Year. Thor, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Anybody who hasn't checked out your stuff, they should. I mean, you're really excellent at what you do. I would say to call you an excellent writer is probably an understatement. So I've enjoyed looking at your stuff. And everybody should give you a follow at ThorKU if they aren't following you already. So
thank you so much.
Absolutely. Let's dig into this draft. I'm going to kind of start it off. I put out just for a couple of questions before I even announced who was coming on. Questions about the Browns, and I got a couple of responses, and we'll just kind of kick it off with this. I got a question from one of my friends, Eric Huber. It's at Eric Huber 3, and his question is, what is the likelihood that the Browns trade down from the 10th spot? Are the chances just as good that they trade up? And I'm just going to tie these two together because I got another question. It's from at Nicholas_Walters, and that's with AB being Andrew Berry, saying, don't assume we're taking an O-lineman with the 10th pick. What are your thoughts on what we'll do? So let's just kind of get your likelihood of what you think the Browns might do, or how likely they are to stay at 10, move up or down, and how likely it is offensive lineman. How likely is it that they actually go a different direction?
Yeah, well, I'll be curious to pick your brain on this as well, Rod. Because covering this stuff, looking into the prospects and stuff, and then having to do mock drafts, you're sort of looking at it from the outside. So it's always interesting to talk to someone that covers the team up close. My perception from the outside is it is sort of left tackle or bust at 10, and because of that. I don't know how you can trade down because, in this class, you have the four guys and then there's a drop off, and then, you have that tier and then there's a drop off and then you have a guy like, Josh Jones or Ezra Cleveland or whatever. But is Cleveland going to be comfortable, dropping down and taking a guy like Cleveland? Maybe, like in the 20s or whatever to pick up some draft equity, but I don't know if I would be if I had offensive line issues as sort of pronounced as the Browns have had these past couple of years. I think that I would rather stay put and grab one of the four guys that sort of project as all pro talents, because there's almost no chance that one of those four guys is not there. And I don't think that you have to trade up, and you look at Cleveland's picks right now. If I have I think they have the 10th pick. I think they're at 41 in the second round, 74, and they have a comp pick in the third round, right?
Yeah, it's 97. Yeah,
97, and then we got a 4th, a 6th, and a 7th, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's me, with the holes that the Browns have, that's not a huge amount of ammunition. You're not sitting on, for instance, like the Dolphins war chest of picks there. You're not sort of in a comfortable position where, the Browns can sort of say, oh, we've fallen in love with this tackle, so we have to move up the board and get this guy. I think if I'm them, I sort of stay put and allow the board in some ways to dictate who I get. And frankly, to answer the other question, I think they're in an okay spot because I think one of the tackles who projects the cleanest to left tackle, which is, I think what the Browns need, I think is the guy who is getting slept on. And it's sort of in a strange way because he was the guy who had the best college career of the four, and that's Georgia's Andrew Thomas. He was the guy who was consistently the best from his freshman season, where he's a right tackle, and then he kicked over to the left side. He's been the best throughout. He does have some technical things to work through, but all these guys have issues to work through. And Thomas was consistently the best by, PFF grading and all that kind of stuff against better competition. So if it's me and I'm Cleveland, I'm sitting there and I would be fine taking a guy like Andrew Thomas. If Wirfs gets through to me, I'd be fine taking him. If Wills gets there. And if for me, Becton is number 4 on that list. If Becton's the 4th, if the other 3 guys are gone and Becton falls to me, well, I suppose I'll be taking Becton. But that's the way that I would be looking at it.
Yeah. Do you feel like the Browns would be okay with having any of those guys be their left tackle starter as a rookie?
The tough thing about it is, for me, I don't know how other people see it, but for me, Andrew Thomas is a pretty easy projection there, where you can go Thomas left, you can go Conklin right. The other guys, it's pretty difficult. Like Becton, no, for sure. Becton is like, you think of him, it's more like, Brian, I suppose Brian McKinney, but almost more like, Phil Lodeholt or, Orlando Brown. You're talking more of like the hulking right tackle. Like best case scenario, I suppose, would be Brian McKinney, but I don't think that I don't know that Becton moves well enough to project him there. I don't think he moves as well as McKinney does. And then Wirfs certainly moves well enough, but he lacks length out there. So the projection's not quite as smooth. You could certainly try, the good thing about Wirfs is, you could try it. If it doesn't work, you could always stick him at right tackle, and he's got Pro Bowl potential at guard. If you had to keep Conklin there, so you could always just slide him down. And Jedrick Wills, I think his best position is right tackle too. So, the fact that the Browns already signed one and 3 of the 4 guys project best at right makes it somewhat problematic, but where I feel like they're in a good spot is that I feel like the rest of the NFL is sort of zero. Andrew Thomas, nobody look over there, whatever. Don't talk about him and just slide down to us, Andrew, slide down to us.
Yeah, but if the rest of the NFL kind of figures this out and he ends up going higher, than what we expect, you're still okay with Becton or Wills and just putting them, I guess, at right tackle and maybe moving Conklin to left and just kind of figuring it out just because of the talent these guys have.
I think so. Browns fans watching that offensive line, it was a travesty. It can't get worse than it was last year. So, bringing in talent, you already brought in a large amount of talent. Let's bring in more talent. If whatever situation that they're in, whichever the 4 guys fall down, if it's a scenario where it's just one of them and you're sort of in that position, as opposed to, sort of audibling and feeling like you have to do something else that, taking a lesser position, but maybe an equal player at it, a position of lesser need. I think that I would do that, where I would take a guy that maybe it's a cleaner projection to right tackle, go to camp. Let's just see which of those 2 guys would be a better fit at left, and we'll just figure it out there, is what I would do.
Yeah. And you talked about the drop off. There's a drop off to Josh Jones and Ezra Cleveland. How much of a drop off? And I know that Josh Jones played left tackle. So what's your thoughts on that drop off? And how quickly would you see him as an NFL starter at left tackle? And if could the Browns be tantalized to think that, well, maybe we do need a left tackle instead of taking one of these guys to play right. And what's your thought at that kind of a strategy?
Okay, so I could see that, because the Browns, like, if they feel like we could use more draft equity here, and let's say that, for instance, let's say that they do like Thomas, and let's say that Thomas does go above them, and this draft does have some real studs there at the top, and let's say one of those guys starts to fall down. There's a team in the late teens or in the early 20s is like, we really have to move up. And maybe they're offering a first round pick next year. Maybe they're offering a prime day 2 pick and, a prime day 3 pick to move up, whatever. Like, maybe that is in the Browns' best interest, and maybe they do talk themselves into that. And sure, that, a guy like Josh Jones or a guy like Ezra Cleveland, they do project, as a left tackle. They do have the movement skills there. They are pass protectors, and they are guys in college that over multiple years excelled in pass protection. But they both have warts that the top 4 guys don't. Josh Jones he's a very weird prospect. He comes from, both of them come from the G5. Josh Jones comes from Houston. Josh Jones is a guy who, he came on really quickly. He played basically his entire career, but he got better, and then was dominant at the end of his career. He moves well, and he was dominant, like I say, but he has some real technical issues, and he was able to dominate despite them. But he needs some real work, because like some of this stuff, you don't know how it's going to project to the next level unless he gets that polish. And so like, in terms of an immediate fit, like at left tackle, I'm not sure that I would trust Josh Jones. Like if I had a playoff team, I'm going to install Josh Jones right now. Like his handwork is not good right now. His footwork isn't very good right now. He doesn't take good angles, like in the run game. He blocks high sometimes. And in the G5, that was okay. Like his movement skills, his power, like it overcame everything. But in the NFL, it's hard to know. I mean, it's sort of hard to project that it will, that it's going to continue to. Because he was just so physically dominant at that level that it was just sort of able to overcome those technical deficiencies. And then as far as like Ezra Cleveland, he's way more of he's way more straightforward, where he's going to be really good in pass protection, I think, right away, just because of his movement skills. Like I comp him to Brian O'Neill. He moves really well. He's a tremendous athlete. He's going to shuffle side to side really quick. No one's going to, get around Ezra Cleveland just by, speed or quickness. Like it's not going to happen. But Ezra Cleveland struggles with power, and he's always going to struggle with power. Like that's just going to be the case. And so, that there's going to be, in the run game, that's always going to have a deleterious potentially effect on your running game unless you have a zone blocking system. He's going to need some help, especially when he's against power ends. And so it's like it's a sort of trade-off. Like, if the Browns are okay, with a guy like Cleveland like that, like prioritizing sort of the pass protection, the movement skills, stuff like that, maybe they do want to move down, and get sort of like the finesse guy. Like Cleveland was a guy that dominated in pass pro over multiple years, and we already know that he's a 90th percentile plus tackle athlete. So, I mean, that would be in play. But like I say, he's never going to be a plus run blocker. So it just is what it is.
All right. So if assuming again that, or not assuming, but going under the assumption that Thomas has gone at 10, who could be on the board that would make the Browns maybe just take the pick, other than one of the tackles?
So
another possession. I mean, and I'm not talking somebody like Chase Young, because that's not going to happen. But who would you see that the Browns would say, "Oh, we can't pass this guy up"? that could
tough.
possibly fall down there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so, obviously, okay. So if tackle's no longer in play, the other, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the needs, linebacker, Isaiah Simmons likely won't be there. Although in a scenario where, 3 or 4 of those tackles go, like if there's this huge run immediately on tackles, and I mean, those, like I said,
tackles and QBs, right? Yeah,
exactly. There is a scenario where, especially if, I saw that, I don't know if it was Todd McShay or someone, one of the big draft names recently had Jordan Love going, I think, to the Chargers. Now, I don't think that will happen, but if Jordan Love does go in the top 10, Browns fans should celebrate, because that's like a free spot on the bingo board. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
One more dude falls down the board if you hear Jordan Love's name go in the top 9. So, I mean, definitely root for that. But, if you're going to get 3 quarterbacks for sure. So if you get 4 offensive linemen, I mean, if Isaiah Simmons falls to 10, that's one scenario where I say, you know what, maybe we just say, let's forget about the offensive line for a round. That would be one scenario where I forget about the offensive line if Isaiah Simmons is there, because Isaiah Simmons, for me, he's a top 5 prospect, and he's a defensive prospect almost unlike we've ever seen before. Like he's an athlete who is just south of Kelvin Johnson's neighborhood, who can do everything. Like last year, he plays, like 825 snaps for Clemson. He plays 100 plus snaps at 5 different positions. I mean, think about this. He had free safety, strong safety, slot cornerback, off-ball linebacker, and edge defender. And not only that, but he had like an 80-plus grade as a run defender, as a tackler, as a pass rusher, and in coverage. I think at every qualifying position. And he became the first player since Khalil Mack to have 100 tackles and, 10 plus sacks and 12 plus TFL or 15 plus TFL and multiple interceptions. He's just a different kind of defensive weapon. He tested as a 10 on RAS for linebackers, which means he's the most athletic linebacker who's ever tested in Ken Lee Platt's RAS system. He's just a different kind of dude. And, he's listed as a linebacker, but it's not instructive to think of him as a linebacker. He's like a destructive piece. He's a queen on the chessboard. I mean, certainly, on your roster, you put the LB next to his name and, he's going to line up there a bit, but he would allow the Browns to do so many different things. They could put him back at safety. Sometimes they can sick him on someone in the slot. If the other team has a stud slot receiver, obviously you can put him at, off-ball linebacker, but you can also sick him off the edge, like when you really need to get pressure on the quarterback. He can just do so many different things that can help your defense. So he would be the one guy where if there's this worst case scenario where the Browns can't get that tackle that they need, he would be the guy that I would be praying for, especially because, y'all's two, at least the way that I see it, y'all's two next couple needs, it's linebacker and safety. Yeah. Isaiah Simmons crosses both off the list.
Definitely. Okay. Well, that's great. So let's move on to the other positions. I think most of the Browns mock drafts I have seen, the most popular guy to mock it at number 41 is Antoine Winfield Jr.
Oh.
So help me out if that is a Cleveland thing or if everybody's mocking him at the top of the second round. And he's obviously a guy that you're very familiar with,
yes,
having played in Minnesota. So just kind of tell me what you think of that slot in a mock, what you think of the safety class, and what you think the Browns might do at 41.
Yeah, and for the folks at home, I'm coming to you live from Minneapolis. I've lived in Minnesota all my life. My dad went to Minnesota. I went to grad school at Iowa, so I sort of had to go against the Gopher thing. But I catch a lot of Gopher football. I haven't released my defensive back rankings, so I'm going to be breaking a little news here because I haven't put this out yet. I'm going to be one of the few people in the industry who, and I might be the only one, I'm not sure. I'm going to be ranking Antoine Winfield as safety number 1. Antoine Winfield is an absolute stud. He's an absolute stud. He's a game-changing stud. in college, he would win games by himself, like where he would steal plays where there's like, how did Antoine Winfield get there? Like where he would see plays develop before, like, it was like he knew where the ball was going before the quarterback did. And he would just be in places. It was like he had no business being there. And the only question with Antoine Winfield, I mean, he can't affect his size. Obviously, he's got kind of his dad's frame, a little bit. He's 5'9", 203. But like the other question with him was athleticism, and he went out and totally put that to bed in Indy and tested way better than people thought that he was going to test. He tested 81st percentile in Spark. In fact, he tested way better than the whoever on safety number one is, Xavier McKinney. For me, Antoine Winfield is the best safety in the class. And so if he got down there, for me, that would be a slam dunk pick. For me, Antoine Winfield he's a first round player. That's just how I see him. So yeah, for me, if I'm the Browns and I got that tackle in the first round and Antoine Winfield's there in the second round, that is an A+ draft. If I get my starting left tackle and then Antoine Winfield, I've just gotten 2 starters for the next decade. Like I'm good. I'm good.
Nice. So I'm not going to ask you to go through all your rankings, but if since I looked for your safety rankings, couldn't find them, and that's why I couldn't find them. So
exactly, they're coming out on Wednesday. So. Okay.
Anyways, assuming that Antoine Winfield does go in the first round, somewhere between 20th on down, who would you think the Browns might be looking at that 41 spot? You think it's more likely they go safety there, or you think linebacker in that situation, and then maybe look at safety in the third round?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting because there's, both classes are kind of interesting, and the safety one, I feel like the safety class is like, there's something for every taste, and we got a couple things going on with it where there's a lot of different people see the safety class very differently. I mean, outside of sort of Xavier McKinney, a lot of people have him, most people have him number one, but outside of that, there's a lot of disparate opinions on these guys. So, and for instance, Grant Delpit, who everyone said, a year ago, everyone would have said Grant Delpit's the first safety. I would bet you $500 that Grant Delpit is going to be available when the Browns pick at, in the second round. I think
41.
Sure,
okay.
That's what I think. I don't believe that he's going to go in the first round, and I don't even think he's going to go in the top of the second. It seems like the NFL has sort of soured on him, and the reason is because last year he didn't play very hard, and he's always had issues tackling. He's got kind of a finesse game, and he doesn't like to. I'll just put it to you this way: his PFF grades the last couple years in tackling in 2018, and this is when he was playing well. It was 59.8, which is pretty poor. And then last year, when his game really dropped off, it fell down to 44.5, which, I'm scrolling down. I got all these in a spreadsheet. That's pretty much as bad as it gets in the entire class. There's nobody is he like, so to conceptualize this, he's like the worst tackling safety in the entire class. Now, can he fix that? Well, sure. I mean, he's got all the gifts in the world, but he has not been motivated to this point. And last year was his payday. I mean, that's like, last season was his job interview. Was his 15-game job interview, and his game just rapidly fell off the table. He fell from an 84.4 PFF grade overall to 68.7, which was, bizarre. And his tackling got even worse. So, I think he will be available to the Browns. I don't know that the Browns would want to take him. So you might want to hold off on safety to the third round, because there's some safeties that I don't know how the Browns will look at this, but there's some safeties that I like a lot that I think would be available then. Number one on my list would be Kayvon Wallace from Clemson, Isaiah Simmons' teammate. he's a little bit overlooked, and I think the reason is because he played next to Isaiah Simmons. But like Simmons, he's pretty versatile. Brent Venables trusted him a lot, moved him around, and he does a bunch of different stuff. He's good in coverage. He's a very sure tackler. He can rush the passer. He's good against the run. I mean, like he's good in every phase, and he's very good in coverage, which is big for me. So he would be a guy that I would potentially look at, like if I didn't go someone, a safety in the second round. And if as far as a linebacker, if you were sort of sitting there on that, Simmons is going to be gone. Obviously, I think Patrick Queen's going to be gone. Kenneth Murray probably is going to be gone, although I'd be okay with that if I'm a Browns fan. I'm a little bit lower on him. Kenneth Murray's a stud athlete, and he put up really good stats, but his instincts are really bad. Both against the run and in coverage. And some of those Oklahoma defenses were pretty bad too. So he just vacuumed up a lot of stuff. I'm not sure that he's going to turn into the Pro Bowler that other people think he will. So I think I would be okay with that. A couple names that I would look at that you guys have probably bandied around, just thinking about linebackers in the second round. Zach Bond from Wisconsin. He's a guy who we know is, and by the way, one of the reasons that he, could be available there, he played edge at Wisconsin, number one, and now he's going to move back to off ball just because he's shorter. Like he just doesn't project as well to the edge. So he was playing out of position, number one, and then he has some medical stuff, in his past or whatever. So that's why he might fall, 10, 15 slots below where his production the past couple of years might dictate. But like, we know that he's awesome as a pass rusher, like one of the class's best guys from the second level, getting after the quarterback. And he's also very good in coverage, which people don't talk about as much because he's so good at getting after the quarterback, but very good in coverage, both by conventional stats, both on film and by the advanced stats as well. And he's also good in run defense. So, I mean, like, and he's a good athlete. So, I mean, he's sort of got everything going on for him. Another guy I like a lot is Akeem Davis-Gaither from Appalachian State, just a tackle machine, and just so hard to block. He's one of those guys, like, I compare him to like a pop-up doll, like a murderous pop-up doll. Like, no matter how many times you hit him, you just can't, like, get him on the ground. He just keeps popping up and coming at you. So he he's a guy who's going to clean up, just everything in the run game. And he's a guy who's like he's the size of a safety, and yet you can't block him. Even guys 100 pounds like heavier than him. He's not been as good in coverage in college, but he has all the athleticism in the world to do it. So I think that aspect of his game projects potentially better at the next level. He's a hard worker. So those would be a couple guys I potentially look at. For me, there's a bit of a drop off there, unless you want to roll the dice on a character guy like Willie Gay or, they're like, I wouldn't take, I mean, like the Browns fans might want the Browns to take like a guy like Malik Harrison there, like someone like that. I'm not down with Malik Harrison because I don't think he's as good in coverage. He's awesome in run defense. Like Malik Harrison he's great in run defense. Like he's really an enforcer there. But for me, if I'm gonna use like a pick that has that much value, like a top 40, top 41 pick, on a linebacker, off-ball linebacker, I want that guy to be really good in coverage. Malik Harrison is someone that, like, he can be hidden in zone coverage. Like, I think he could do okay in that, but that's about it. He, if you put him in man coverage, I think he's just going to get torched over and over again. So, for me, I don't think that I would want Malik Harrison there. So that's kind of how I would look at it anyway.
Okay, so assuming I'm using the word assuming too much, but if the Browns went tackle, then linebacker, then safety, they have another pick in the third round. Let's say they were going to look at somebody for the defensive line. Who might be somebody that they might might be available that might be a fit for the Browns, with that probably the last with that comp pick in the third round.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you'd have multiple options here depending on who falls down. But I think, again, it's, for whatever your taste is. I mean, one guy, potentially a guy who would have gone much higher potentially, a year ago, Raekwon Davis from Alabama. And he's a guy who's like a sort of perception against reality kind of a guy, because 2 years ago when he sort of jumped onto the scene in 2017, he put up ridiculous numbers in terms of sacks and tackles for loss. And for Alabama, and people were like, oh my gosh, Raekwon Davis, and, he's going to be like a top 10 pick and all this stuff. And his stats ever since then, they just dropped. But, if you look at his PFF numbers, like his pass rushing, rates and stuff like that, like his grades, his pressure rates, everything like that, they actually got better since then. And so it seems as though his first year, he sort of got lucky with some of those sacks, and stuff like that. And ever since then, he's actually gotten a bit better at pushing the pocket. It's just that those did not show up in his statistical profile or whatever. Meanwhile, he's awesome at stuffing the run. He's just a war daddy. He's 6'6", 311. Like he's like, I compare him like to the Mountain from Game of Thrones.
That'll play in the NFL. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like he just has like so much surface area, and he's so powerful. Like it takes like two guys, and even two guys, like, Raekwon's just like, I'm not moving. So, and he's a guy too, the Browns, their linebacking core, at least right now, we'll see if Isaiah Simmons falls to them, but at least right this second, they have a below average NFL linebacking core. Raekwon Davis is a guy who is going to play up your linebacking core no matter how good it is, because he keeps your linebackers clean. He's a guy who screws with interior offensive lines because he grabs folks and doesn't let them go. So he keeps linebackers clean. So he'd be one potential guy. If you're sort of going the other way, a guy that I think may fall down there, maybe not. I'm not sure, but his rival in college, Marlon Davidson, was a guy that played on the edge, and at Auburn. I don't know how the NFL sees him, so it's sort of tough for me to know if he's going to be available there. But he was played out of position because he played next to Derrick Brown, and if Marlon Davidson had gone to a place where Derrick Brown wasn't, he would have played the 3 technique, and I think Marlon Davidson would have been a lot better off in college, because Marlon Davidson was like a ballyhooed prospect and, all this kind of stuff. He's 6'3", 303, he moves around really well and stuff like this, but he had to play on the edge because all the talent Auburn had on the defensive line. I think he projects much better to a 3 technique. I think he's going to cause a lot more disruption in there. His game, it behooves it much better to play in there. So, he's a guy that potentially could fall down there. Maybe. James Lynch is another guy where, he might go higher, but there's also a potential that he falls down for sort of the same reason that he played on the edge in college, but he's 6'4", 289. But he doesn't have the athleticism to play to play on the edge in the NFL. So I think he has to move inside. And he was a banshee last year. Like, he put up enormous numbers. So he's a guy you could potentially look at. Another run stuffing guy, Lecky Fotu from Utah. McTelvin Agam from Arkansas is another 3 technique, another interior penetrator guy that I think is a sleeper, that I think might be there. And then a last name that you guys have probably bandied about because he's a local kid, just another run stuffer guy. I mean, he's more of a situational guy, at least as far as I go, but Davon Hamilton from Ohio State, he was a guy that played situationally for Ohio State, but very similarly, like I was talking about before, like he's a guy that we know eats up blockers and stuffs the run. Some people think that he's more than that. For me, that's basically all he is. Like, as far as pushing the pocket, I'm not sure about that. Like, he does have a bull rush, but I don't trust so much as a pass rusher. But as far as on early downs, like, I trust him to muck things up in there and knock heads. So he'd be another guy that, as far as a third round pick in there, he'd be a guy that you could look at for sure.
Yeah, so that takes the Browns down to, if they could fill those positions the way they want to, assuming that they have the right, the right guys fall to them, because I think you have to be realistic. I think the Browns, or we hope the Browns aren't going to reach too much, that they're going to take the spot of need, but they're also going to not pass on guys that are obvious talents that are sitting there for them. So if it happens that they take these positions that we've talked about in the first 3 rounds, that gets them down to picks, in the 4th, 6th, and 7th. And I don't know. I kind of feel like they would probably be looking for, another linebacker, maybe another safety, and maybe just kind of the BPA, whoever happens to fall to them at that point. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Sure. Or, if you want to take a receiver, this class, as is historically stocked at receiver, and the Browns, maybe they could use one more guy, if you want to use, whether it's the 4th or the 6th. The great thing about this class, and especially, a team like the Browns, obviously, you're set with your first 2 guys. If you're just looking for a 3rd guy, this class, I mean, and with especially with the way that we just structured the Browns draft, in the middle rounds here, you're going to be able to find a guy where in normal years he would go a round or 2 rounds above where you're going to be able to get him in this one. So just like in the first round, you were talking about like Andrew Thomas or like, some of these different things, like the Browns may be sitting sort of quasi pretty in some of these spots just situationally. And, I think like a sort of like a secondary or a tertiary need like receiver, if you play this thing right, you might be sitting in a really good spot, like you're sitting around here like a guy like Van Jefferson. People love Van Jefferson, or like a guy like Brian Edwards. Brian Edwards has some really good tape. If you're looking for like to get an outside physical receiver, Brian Edwards in a normal class, he might be a 2nd round guy. Whereas in this class, he might be a 4th round guy, merely just because of the depth of the class and because he broke his ankle. That's literally it. Like for those 2 reasons, he's going to fall 2 rounds. Well, you're going to get him at a huge discount, or you could take the local kid KJ Hill, who in a regular year, 3rd rounder, maybe even a late 2nd rounder, he's going to be available at a sticker discount just because of the class itself. So, you might be sitting in a nice spot because of that, or, you could look at another position and sort of defer receiver because, again, the receiver class is so deep. It's almost like whatever round you decide to take that receiver, you're going to get a discount. But I actually think the 4th round for the Browns, that might be the sweet spot because I feel like right in there, you're going to get a guy who in a normal year should be a 2nd or a 3rd round guy. And there might be a feeding frenzy on receivers like in the 4th round. So that might be a nice time for the Browns to jump in.
Yeah, that makes sense because there's so many good receivers, and a lot of those guys are going to go, first, 2nd round, they're going to start going. But how many teams are going to take 2 or 3 receivers in the first, 3 rounds? Exactly. They're going to wait, and then they're going to want to go back to the well again, 4th, 5th, 6th round. And with the Browns being at the top of the 4th, they could kind of get in the top of that 2nd run.
Exactly. And to your point, for instance, I mean, like, on my board now, I have like John Hightower is an absolute burner from Boise State. I got him 19. Devin Duvernay is a guy who runs in the 4.3s from Texas, had over 100 receptions last year. I have him 18. Brian Edwards is the guy I was just talking about. I have him 20. Colin Johnson, 6'6" from Texas, 6'6", 222, who, people were talking about him as a first-round pick a couple years ago, 21. I got KJ Hill, 22, and Van Jefferson, 23. Some people have those guys higher. And like I said, normal years, they would for sure be, day 2 guys, maybe even 2nd round guys, 22, 23. Kalijah Lipscomb, James Proche, 25, 26. Quez Watkins, he's a 4.3 guy. I got him 27. I mean, like Darnell Mooney, he was a guy I did a report on today. I got some information that the NFL loves him. That the NFL that he's going to be a 4th or a 5th round guy, that he's getting a lot of those kind of grades. I have him 33. So like to your point, a team takes, one of these receivers 1st or 2nd round. We talk about, this is a historically stocked class, but yeah, like, are you going to take a receiver in the 1st and the 3rd? No, probably not. Like you take that, you take the one, like, maybe you take one later on, but like I just feel like the 4th round is would be kind of the sweet spot. So that might be the time where the Browns jump in with that.
Yeah, that's I really hadn't even thought about receiver, that much up till then, because of the Browns having what we thought were so many needs on defense, and they've addressed some of them. But yeah, I think to be able to get a great talent at receiver, it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you're just gonna get you're gonna get such a discount on the sticker price. I'm really big on that, and I just feel like it's a guy who might be able to play in your three receiver sets potentially, and if you can get a guy that you feel like complements your other two guys really well, in some way, however you see that, and especially in this class, you will be able to find a guy for whatever your flavor is. Whether they want to pop the top guy would be, a guy like, for instance, Darnell Mooney, runs in the mid 4.3s, or whether you want like that big physical outside guy, would be like a Brian Edwards kind of a guy. They're going to be able to find him. Whereas, like, literally, if these guys were just in next year's draft, potentially, the Browns would potentially need to take them 40, 50 slots higher. So it just might be a nice position for them.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Let's close on this, Thor. What do you see as, or kind of lay out for me what you think would be kind of a perfect draft for the Browns, just kind of maybe up through that fourth round?
All right. So I'm going to go Andrew Thomas first. I didn't know that everyone was giving Winfield to them at 41, but
I've seen a lot of people do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think he'll be there, but if people are saying that, I guess I'll give him Winfield. Frankly, I want the Vikings to take him, but the Vikings aren't gonna, because they don't need a safety. But man, would that be a grand slam? So I like Cleveland. I root for Cleveland. I want you guys to win. I want you to know that. So I'm gonna give you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, as long as Antoine Winfield doesn't go to the Packers, I'm gonna be fine with it. So we're gonna give you guys Winfield at 41. At 74. Let's see. We could go. I'm going to hold off on receiver till the fourth round. I think we did it right the first time around. Yeah. So I think. So
you got probably a linebacker at 74.
Yeah, I think it's 74. Let's go. Okay. Malik Harrison's probably going to be gone. I think Davis Gaither's probably going to be gone. For me, I think this is the time to roll the dice on Willie Gay, who is a linebacker from Mississippi State, who is a fabulous. I'm not sure how much your listeners know about Willie Gay, but Willie Gay is a fabulous athlete. Like he's just south of Isaiah Simmons as far as like athletes at the linebacker position, but he's kind of a nutcase. He got suspended 8 or 9 games this past season for academic fraud, and then the first game he came back, he got ejected for 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, and then leading up to the bowl game, he broke the starting quarterback's orbital bone. And knocked him out for the bowl game because they got in an altercation. Somehow Willie Gay did not get suspended for the bowl game for that. And then he went out and made 11 tackles and got a TFL in it. But here's the thing. He has athleticism that is ridiculous. Like, he's like 98th, 99th percentile. And the other thing is, in coverage over his entire career was stupid good. Like his I have this stat in my column, which is not in front of me, but like his quarterback rating against over his entire career in coverage was something like 48, his NFL quarterback rating against. So he's an awesome cover linebacker, which is, crazy valuable in the NFL. And the athleticism is going to play, and against the run, like his instincts are sort of questionable, and he has to be kept clean. But if we can find a defensive tackle to keep them clean. If we can find some interior help, that can occupy some guys up there, and allow just Willie to run around and hit people. Like, he's a violent player. He's one of those guys that plays with passion, obviously. So like, he'd be a guy that I think I would roll the dice on. If you want to go safe, you could go like a guy like Logan Wilson from Wyoming would be another kind of option. But if it's me, I roll the dice on Willie Gay. Like, if we're the Browns, like, we're trying to come up, like we want to take the next step. Like, you have to roll the dice on some of these guys, and Belichick, he'd roll the dice on one guy a year, whatever. Like, the Browns are going to have to roll the dice on a couple character guys. Like, I feel like Willie Gay, just an athlete of that caliber at that position, a position of need. If we get to the third round, I feel like that would be the time to do it. So for me, I'm going to take him there. That comp pick, let's just say that Raekwon Davis is there. I feel like that would be a really good fit. I don't, I'm not sure that he's going to fall. And let's just say that he doesn't. Let's just take the kid from Utah, Lecky. We'll just take one of the two guys that can that's going to help Willie Gay. One of those two guys that's going to just clog up the middle and is it's going to keep those interior offensive linemen like off of our linebackers. We're just going to build like a fast linebacking core. It's sideline to sideline. We're going to try to get cover linebackers. It's going to help us in coverage and stuff like that. And help us horizontally too. You're not going to be able to run outside the tackles on us. And then in the fourth round, I like our plan before. I think it's a great attack plan. Like, we just knocked out our greatest needs, we did so with guys that are going to fall down the board for contextual reasons that make sense. Like, a guy like Raekwon, he's going to fall down the board, but like, we can explain that his stats fell way off, but they fell off for reasons that can be explained, perceptual reasons. Willie Gay fell off because he's kind of a nutcase, but we're going to have to, we'll just have to trust our staff and, our support staff that we can sort of get through to him or whatever. We're going to have to roll the dice on him. And, we deferred the receiver pick until now, and let's take, we can either take Brian Edwards, we can take KJ Hill, we can take Van Jefferson. We can go Colin Johnson if we want. I mean, like, we can take Darnell Mooney. Do we want speed? Do we want size? Or do we want physicality here? It's like, what flavor do we want? However we want to go, it's going to be available here just because of the depth of the class.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about in the fourth round, but yeah, I hope they go that way.
Yeah, and almost like
make
multiple
us both feel
options.
good.
Yeah, I mean, like, speed wise, I mean, Quez Watkins from Southern Miss, he's probably going to be there. He was an early declaree. He was a guy that put up huge stats too. He's probably going to be there. He ran in the 4.3s as well. And like, just talking about like the outside, physical guys, Colin Johnson very well might be there. Like I said, he was a first round guy a couple of years ago, was being talked about like that. So was Brian Edwards. They both might be there. And then, it's, speed guys. John Hightower might be there. He runs 4.4s, but on the field, he looks like 4.3s. Devin Duvernay is a 4.3 guy. Darnell Mooney is a 4.3 guy. And if you just want to go with like a hands ball skill kind of guy, like James Prochet from SMU, he's for sure going to be there because his testing isn't as good. Isaiah Hodgins is a bigger outside guy with tremendous hands. Like, he doesn't drop anything. He's 6'4", 210. Nice. I mean, like, yeah, there's literally something for everyone here. And obviously the Browns have the slot taken care of, and they have one of the outside spots taken care of. They might be looking for one of those bigger guys. So if you are looking for one of the bigger guys on the outside, I think the names to look for there would be Hodgins, Brian Edwards, Colin Johnson, those would probably be like, I don't think that Antonio Gandy Golden from Liberty will be available there. I'd like him if he was, if he fell down there, but those would be Those would be some, like Van Jefferson would be interesting. He's not as big, he's 6'1", 200, but he can play on the outside. Like those would be
the Browns have right now, I think. I mean, they have a couple guys like that, but not their starters. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those would be some of the guys that I'd be looking at, or you could just go, one of the speed guys that you could just like send on fly routes and try to just open up the middle every time. I mean, you could just take Mooney or Watkins and just send their 4.3 speed down as a decoy every time and just open things up for the other guys.
That'd be kind of fun too. Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's a solid plan. Yeah. I think a lot of Browns fans would sign up for that right now, that draft, definitely.
I think we just figured it out, and this draft is going to be remote, so I think we could just knock it out right now.
Yeah, perfect. Well, hey, Thor, I really want to thank you again for coming on the podcast, joining me, and talking some Browns draft. I'm going to let you kind of give your Twitter handle and tell everybody where they can find all of your work real quick here.
Hey, thanks a lot, Rod. Yeah, you guys can find me at Thorku, Thorku, on Twitter, and check us out at Rotoworld. I have all the scouting reports by position up right now. Every position is up except for defensive backs, which is going to come up on Wednesday. Right after that, I'm going to have my updated position rankings, I think, are on Thursday. And then my favorite column, or my favorite feature of the year, will be coming up shortly after that, which is the Thor 500, where it's my ridiculously big board, which is just stacked without any expository nonsense, just like the bare details, but I have a comp on all 500 players. So I'm excited about that again, setting that up right now. That'll be out, and of course a mock draft, and we have plenty of draft content at Rotoworld, as you guys probably know. So come and check us out, and again, appreciate it, Rod. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, guys, these position rankings are not just lists. Okay, you really need to check it out. So go to Thor's Twitter and kind of just scroll through, and you'll find all the different position rankings he has up, or I think you can find those at Rotoworld too, right, Thor? And it's extensive. It's a lot of work put into it. It's everything you want to know. And so just check out the man's work. It's excellently done. And I want to thank you again. Any words of wisdom for the fans of the Cleveland Browns, Thor?
Yeah, I do. And I'm coming from Minnesota, and you guys have to understand that we are essentially just as tortured as you guys are. We don't really get championships here. We had the Twins in '91, but outside of that, obviously the Vikings have never won anything. The Timberwolves are the worst franchise in the NBA. The Wild have never won anything in the NHL. So we're essentially in the same boat, and it's sort of just in some ways, it's just like the coronavirus itself. It's just like, let's just hang in there. We just have to have positivity, and we will get through this. What's that Batman quote? Like the dawn is darkest before daybreak or whatever. We will see a championship. The Browns will win a championship. Everyone out there who's listening to this, you will have a Super Bowl in your lifetime. I guarantee you. Just like the Vikings are going to win a Super Bowl in my lifetime. If you stop believing that, there's all hope is gone. You have to believe that. So continue to believe that it's going to happen.
Excellent. I can't say any better than that, but that's why you were College Writer of the Year. So once again, thanks for joining us. This has been the Browns Blitz, and we will catch you next time.